You told us to ignore the voices who keep telling us to abandon our conservative principles. We will remain true to our principles. Hope. That's really the theme of this convention. And that thing that you call meaning could be for you a home, a career, a family, a business. Seeing your autistic daughter speak for the first time is the thing. It's the thing. The unsung heroes who built and protect this country, who have it infinitely harder than I do, they never give up, so I have no right to give up.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre there vowing that his party will remain true to conservative values. Poilievre passed the biggest test of his leadership this past weekend. Following last year's election loss, the Conservative leader faced a review on whether he should remain at the helm of the party. At his party's national convention, he delivered a nearly 50-minute campaign-style speech. More than 2,500 ballots were cast, representing 95% of eligible delegates attending the event. The results were overwhelmingly in favor of Poilievre, with the leader receiving 87.4% of the vote. So what message does Poilievre's decisive victory send, and what comes next for both him and the party? Our front bench is back to talk about that. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. Tom, I'll start with you. What do you read into the number? What do you take away from the weekend?
Back when I was in the Quebec Liberal Party as a member of the National Assembly, Daniel Johnson had been premier. He was our leader. After an election that he had lost, he had a leadership review, got a number in the mid-80s. He's a bright guy, very strong. And we realized one thing, that he was going to have a heck of a hard time connecting with people and couldn't win an election. It was a very rough situation. He was replaced by Jean Charest, who went on later to win several elections for the Quebec Liberals. I thought of that when I saw that number in the mid-80s for Poilievre. What could be better? But as you correctly say, Vashti, those are the people in that room in Calgary. Yeah. It's not even the wider conservative body across Canada, many of whom in Ontario were having their own convention. So let's not get ahead of ourselves with what that number means with regard to the whole country. I've spoken to any number of people who are in that party, and especially people who have been in caucus. And they remember the Pierre Poilievre, who was very rough on them when he was 28% ahead in the polls. He decided who could speak, what they could say, and good luck to you if you went outside those rules. Caucus is essential to the leadership. And I think that Mr. Poilievre has started to figure that out. But the wider Canadian voting public, you have to look at the numbers that come out constantly. The Conservatives and the Liberals are within a few points. The Libs are a few points ahead, but I mean, that's all margin of error stuff. The real issue is, who are people going to see as their prime minister? Right now, that's Mark Carney. And he might not want to talk about Trump because he didn't want to concede that territory at his speech in Calgary, but that's what people are thinking of. Is he capable of handling these big international issues, or is he going to keep talking to us about the same stuff he's been talking about through the last election and all throughout that speech? It was a warmer speech, and good on us for showing that particular very human clip on a personal family level. But beyond that, the question is, what does the wider Canadian voting public think? And I think that they realize what comes out in those polls, that Mr. Poilievre is having trouble connecting with Canadian voters who don't see him as the person who could lead the country. I don't want to be tough saying that, but I do think that that's the case reflected in those polls.
I do have the sense from the interview with Mr. Outhouse, Lisa, that there wasn't like a lot of disagreement with that assessment. Like, we agree, you know, we reinforced this weekend the set of policies that we thought worked in the last election, we think matters at this moment in time to Canadians, but there is a tone issue. And even when I pushed a little bit and said, like, would you agree with the assessment from public opinion polls that there's a likability issue, that Mr. Poilievre has a likability problem, he didn't really say that wasn't the case, and he pointed to a number of sort of instances in which other parts, other aspects of his personality, he said, would be on display. What do you make of that?
So where I've landed on all this is that Pierre fought the last election by pointing to Justin Trudeau and tearing down the leader. What he's going to have to do this time, though, is to connect with Canadians and ask them, are they really better off than they were before? And then put out a plan so how he will make it better for them. And I think that's what he started to do in the speech. He was a little bit lighter in terms of going after Mr. Carney. He really talked about how the Liberals have caused you to be in the place that you're in right now as you reflect upon your own life. I'd also say this, Vashi, that Donald Trump isn't going to be around forever. He's not going to necessarily be here next year with this kind of turmoil. meaning that we may have a NAFTA deal, we may have a CUSMA deal at the end of the summer, and all of this kind of flattens out and straightens away. And at that point in time, Canadians will start to look around and going, okay, well, we're not worried about the geopolitical stuff much anymore. Who understands me, my troubles, my problems, and who has the best plan for getting us out of the situation we're in? And that's when I think Pierre can compete one-on-one.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, Brian, a whole bunch of things that could happen, like Trump fades from the ecosystem, and as I discussed with Mr. Outhouse, the NDP resurges, the Liberals really fumble. Mr. Outhouse was pretty specific, though, that like hoping for that stuff would not be a strategy, that they intend to try and grow the share of votes that they got from the last election. Do you sense there, like from what you listened to, what Mr. Outhouse said, like there is a plan to do that, or what would you think would be the advisable plan to do so? Like, is it possible?
Well, I think we talked about in the first segment with the idea that maybe there's going to be a bit of a pivot, a softer tone, and they realize that they can't just be the opposition. Outhouse talked about that as well, which we've talked about numerous times. We have a few people that have served in that position of leader of the opposition, and you have this weird on this call, and we have this weird dynamic that I think Tom and I can speak to, where you're trying to ensure that you keep the government to account, but also you're auditioning for another job, right? You're trying to also communicate why people should put their trust in you. So it is actually quite difficult. That resonated with me when Outhouse mentioned that in his interview. I think, to build on Lisa's point, the trouble started a long time ago, where I think the missed opportunity for the Conservatives was that Poilievre had really brought Trudeau and his government to a halt in terms of public opinion. I mean, it was just, they did such a great job. He did specifically such a good job as leader of the opposition, but he kept at it. And he had a moment, I think, when he was so ahead in the polls where people were pretty much decided on Trudeau's fate, that he could have started to use his newfound position and start to talk about who he is and what he wants to do. And I think that was a missed opportunity for the last election for him. Now, you got to learn from your mistakes. So to your question, what could they maybe do? I mean, if I were them, would entertain kind of what they seem to be doing the last 24, 48 hours. Basically try to say, okay, we've gotten past the leadership review, to Tom's point. We spoke to our base. We've locked that in. Now we really got to start to soften things, let people know what he's about, what drives him, what kind of person he is. And if they do that, then I think they have a better shot. But that was my main advice was at a time when Trudeau people had decided this is tougher, because that's not the case with Carney. So they are in a trickier spot now, but the advice kind of holds, if you will. They really have to get people to know him and basically like him.
I wonder if it ends up materializing at all in something we used to talk about a long time ago when it was Trudeau versus Poilievre, Benzie, which was like they were the attack dogs at each other, right? They kept getting advice to delegate that to other people so that they could kind of position themselves differently, but both of them at the time couldn't help it. And to Lisa's point, that sort of continued during the election, even when the leadership changed from Justin Trudeau to Mark Carney. I denote like a little less of that certainly now, but maybe that ends up being, as I said, one way that this materializes. Maybe it isn't all about Poilievre versus Carney, and Andrew Scheer goes after the Prime Minister, and Mr. Poilievre does something different. I don't know if he'd be willing to give that up, though.
Yeah, I mean, he clearly relishes the role, but what's the old adage that if you look like you're auditioning for opposition leader, you're going to be the opposition leader. And I think he was too negative. I actually. Bashi, you and I have talked about this offline. I'm surprised that they bring out Andrew Scheer as often as they do, because he's a failed former leader. It's not like the Carney Liberals are trotting out Justin Trudeau to sell their policies because he's another failed former leader. You just someone you want to put in your past. If I were Mr. Poilievre, I would be trotting out some of the many talented MPs he's got on his front benches and having them carry a lot of the load, and also the fresher faces. I think he needs to be casting things forward more rather than just looking like a nattering nabob of negativism, as William Safire would have said. But I think he should be very happy. 87.4% is a fantastic result. The North Koreans are jealous, for heaven's sake. So he should be really. And now what he has to do now is batten down the hatches and hope that there isn't another floor crosser in the next week or two. Although maybe he wants 1 or 2 to go so that at least he doesn't have to have an election right away. Because as I said earlier, I don't think they want one. And if I were them, I wouldn't want one right now. Because Lisa's right. Donald Trump will be gone eventually. Trump, as long as Trump is around, it's going to be very, very hard for Poilievre to win an election in this country. We know this. On Saturday night, I was at a speech with 1,000 Conservatives here in Ontario, where Doug Ford spent a lot of time talking about how bad Donald Trump was. And it helps Mr. Ford. He got lots of applause for that. I don't blame Poilievre for not mentioning Trump by name in that room, because a good number of the conservative base, the federal conservative base, they are MAGA folks. They like Mr. Trump. Not 2/3, but certainly close to 1/3. At least that's what Nick Cavalis, the conservative pollster, said on David Hurley's podcast last week, that roughly 1/3 of their 30% solid conservative base thinks Trump does a good job. So they got to be it's a very difficult line for Mr. Poilievre to ride.
Yeah, nobody said it's easy, I guess, leading a party. Thanks, guys, as all of you would know much better than me, well, except for Benzie. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the discussion. Our front bench, Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie.